Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your friendly neighborhood dork, Kylie, and I have a new story for you today. To be honest, I'm not feeling 100% today, but I have a wedding coming up for my best friend this weekend, and I am finally returning to work after 4 weeks now of medical leave come Tuesday. So I figured, you know what, I'm gonna bang out these videos now while I can, and that way when I get home from work, I can just kind of edit and upload as I go. With that said, let's get into today's story. As you can see, I'm wearing a shirt that says Team Colombia 2013. Okay, I was like 16 when I pretty sure I last wore this, and it fits better now than it ever has, which is like ideal. You know that feeling when you try on like old clothes and you're like, wow, I definitely lost weight because this fits so much better than it did. Sometimes it's the reverse where you put like an old shirt on, you're like, wow, this fits worse than it did. I definitely put on weight. I am usually in that category, but if you've watched my previous videos, sorry, my landlord lives above me and she has a dog, a big golden retriever, and when she plays, she like throws herself across the floor, and I just heard her kind of like thud. I got a little distracted. Also, I don't know what's happening with my hair here, but you know what, we'll just kind of tuck that away. Anyway, I digress. As you can guess, today's story takes place in Colombia back in 2013. I was 16 years old at this point, and my church was going on a 2-week-long mission trip to Colombia to do, a different kind of work, humanitarian stuff. And I thought, I'm kind of new to Christianity. I don't really know much about the church or God or any of that. So you know what? I really want to go on this trip and really get a firsthand feel for what it's like to do missionary work. So it was like the beginning of August, I believe it was August 12th, 2013, that we all gathered at the Toronto Pearson Airport. And we said our goodbyes to our families and said, hey, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Little did we know what would happen in those 2 weeks. Well, actually, it turned out to be 2.5 weeks because of a situation that occurred that we're gonna get into. So you're gonna want to stick around because this is kind of a crazy story. During the 2 weeks, we did all sorts of humanitarian things. We got to go to all these different churches and orphanages and just really love on people who were in desperate need of love, of help, even supplies like clothing, toiletries, medical supplies, anything we could do to bring joy to people, that's what we did. It was the most amazing experience. Unfortunately, because of my shot immune system, because of my autoimmune disorder, I got really sick. I think it was like the altitude difference and just, different atmosphere, everything, and I got really sick. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was like vomiting. I looked like death. Like, I'm gonna actually insert a photo here where I have like giant black dark circles under my eyes because of how sick I was. I laugh about it now, but trying to suck it up and be, like healthy and joyful and help people and love on people while you feel like death on the inside is not easy. And it didn't help we're in a foreign country. I'm 16 years old. There's not really much I could do. So throughout these 2.5 weeks, 3 separate incidents occurred where we were in some serious danger. Again, I laugh about it now because it's all over and done with, and hey, you know what? God is good and we all got out alive, so it's fine. I'm trying to learn how to like coffee again. If you watch my previous video, how a routine medical procedure went horribly wrong, then you'll know what I'm talking about. I had some gastro emergency and I haven't been eating normally since, and my taste buds have changed drastically, so everything that should taste good doesn't. So I'm forcing myself to reacquire the taste of coffee because I know I love coffee, but my taste buds are trying to tell me different, and I would like them to just be quiet. So, incident number 1. The first week we were in Colombia, we stayed in the capital city of Bogota, and we stayed in a house that was typically rented out to missionaries. Now, we would all take turns kind of cooking meals and things like that. Take in mind that my missionary team consisted of 12 to 14 people. I think it was 12. There was 4 people above the age of 18, 3 of which were adults, like 1 was a teacher and 2 were parents, one of which was the lead pastor of the trip. The rest of us are all under the age of 17, the youngest being 12. So one day we get back from a long day of doing mission work and we get to our house and we are tasked to make dinner. So it's myself, the youngest, Josiah, who's 12, and I can't remember who the third person was. But as we're in the kitchen, we're hovering around the gas stove, and Josiah's getting the lighter ready to light up the stove because it's one of those. And I smell something kind of weird and funny, and I'm like, does anyone else smell that? So I call the Pastor Rob, over, and I'm like, hey, Pastor Rob. And I've known this man since I was like 7 years old, so like he's like family to me. And I was like, do you smell that? So then eventually we all kind of smell something weird. And just before Josiah lights the stove, so we can have some heat to cook, I noticed that the stovetop had been left on all day. That house was filled with gas. So any sort of spark would have just ignited the place. So right before Josiah lights it, I just remember shouting at him, and I was like, no, don't do it. It was so scary because if he had just done it, we would have all died. Like, huge explosion, no survivors. So that was pretty scary. So needless to say, we didn't end up cooking dinner that night. I don't remember what we did. All I know is I was like on an adrenaline rush because I was like, holy crap, we almost blew ourselves up. Incident number 2. So Colombia is basically like a mountain country. There's just beautiful mountains and scenery everywhere. So one day we're trying to get to this church that's in the middle of the mountains where nobody ever really goes, and we're actually the first missionary team to ever venture out there. So as we're making our way through this mountain, our bus decides to go off route because the bridge that we needed to cross no longer existed. Don't know why, but it was just a pile of rubble. I gotta catch my breath. I'm just getting so excited telling you stories that I'm like forgetting to breathe. Anyway, so the bus decides to go like down the side of one of the mountains because he thought he could take a different route. And this is like a little old bus, like a little shack basically on wheels. And it's filled with not only my team of 12, but our 2 translators plus the driver, plus there was like 4 others that were joining us to find this church. So this bus is jammed packed with us and all of our belongings, supplies, like things that we're going to be giving out, things that we need to use for, whatever we're doing. This man was confident in his ability to drive down the side of the mountain and go off-roading despite a shack on wheels that was definitely overfilled. As we're going down this hill, we all obviously start panicking, and sure enough, the bus starts to tip on its side. So all of us are kind of freaking out. I believe it was my pastor who started like yelling at one of the translators to like tell the bus driver to stop because we're gonna either fly down this mountain and crash, or we're gonna flip and roll down this mountain and crash. So finally the bus driver stops, but just as the bus finally started to tilt, thankfully it just found this one tree in the entire side of the mountain and just kind of propped up on it. And as the bus is kind of on its side, we all get out and we're like, we're gonna walk the rest of the way down. Like it wasn't that far of a walk. So we walked the rest of the way down, and the bus, amazingly, I believe it's because all our weight was taken off of it, but he managed to get control of the bus and make it all the way to the bottom of the mountain. But then the bus got stuck in mud. So here we are, it's super hot and humid. We're stuck in Colombian mountains. Our bus is stuck in some mud, and we have no idea what we're gonna do. And so the men, just being, the courteous men they are, get, some rope, I believe it was, and they start trying to get the bus out. Some are pushing, some are pulling, and this bus is just not coming out. So eventually we all go over and we're starting to help. And then some of us just kind of slip right where the back wheel was, but the bus driver kept flooring it, trying to get out, which is not really a productive way to get out of mud. And we almost slipped under the tire. It was myself and I believe 2 other of my friends. I can't really remember. It was almost 10 years ago at this point. So people start yelling at the bus driver, stop, like you're gonna run us over. And so eventually after this whole ordeal, we get the bus out, we get back on the bus, and we start going up the mountain. A little ways away, we come up to a big boulder in the middle of the road, and the bus can no longer go any further. So they're like, oh, it's just like a 10-minute hike up the mountain. You'll be fine. You go. Like, walk on foot. I'll wait here for when you come back. And we're kind of like, okay. This 10-minute hike turned out to be almost 3 hours long. We were nowhere near this church that was supposedly 10 minutes up the cliff. As I said, I was super sick. I'm not feeling well. I've been throwing up. Same with one of my other friends. She was throwing up. Like, we were just not well. It's super hot and humid out, and we're in the mountains for hours trying to hike up to find this church. Eventually, I remember throwing up on the side of the mountain. I left part of me in Colombia, and I was just like, I can't go any further. I feel so weak, I'm nauseous, I'm anemic. So my iron levels were super low, and I'm like shaky. I'm like, I'm gonna pass out. This is not a good situation. Finally, some of my team made it to the church, and they sent down motorcycles to come essentially rescue the rest of us that just could not make it. And so there's little 16-year-old me on the back of this tiny motorcycle, and the cliff of the mountain is right there. So like if he just slides, like we're done. And I don't know who this man is. He's just a strange, you know, knight in shining armor who showed up in a leather jacket on a bike. And so he's speaking to me in Spanish, and I have no idea what he's saying because I don't speak Spanish. English and French, yes. Spanish, no. All I know is I need to hold on tight, and so I'm just like gripping onto this man, and I'm like pressing my head against him, and I'm like, okay, let's go. And I'm squeezing for dear life. I felt so bad for the man. But he was laughing, he's having a good time, and I'm like, well, I'm glad my pain is your entertainment. But eventually we made it to the church, we got some food in us, and everything was fine. The day obviously did not go as planned, but hey, we made it out alive. A couple of us were sick, dehydrated, hot, sweaty, but you know what? It wasn't that bad in the end. Now for the third incident. This incident actually made front page news back in my home city, where I no longer live. The reason it made front page news was because of the extent of the situation. Colombia is not exactly the safest country in the world. Obviously it has its great parts, but like any country, it kind of has its faults. Now the drug situation in Colombia is a huge problem. Hence why when you're going to do mission work in a place like Colombia, you have to be careful. Like when we were in Colombian airports, we couldn't actually be honest of why we were there. We kind of had to beat around the bush because foreigners doing missionary work that's all God-centered is not exactly welcomed. In Colombia, the financial situation is not exactly ideal. Back in 2013, riots began to break out across the country because of the unfair pay toward dairy farmers. Now, we were keeping an eye on the news and keeping track of where these riots were taking place, and at this point, it's week 2, it's nearing the end of our time in Colombia, and we're in a little town called Chiquinquirá, which is about 3 hours away from the capital city of Bogota, meaning we are 3 hours away from the airport. One day in the town square of Chiquinquirá, we're just out taking a break and we're doing some souvenir shopping, when all of a sudden our missionary guide, Darren, he's a big guy, and he just started yelling at us to get together because we needed to leave in that moment. It turns out rioters had made their way to Chiquinquirá and they were actively rioting against the Colombian government. Now, we were kind of sheltered from the extent of the situation, but we knew it was not safe for us, especially as foreigners, to be out and about, so we had to book it across town. We were running for our lives, literally. So we ran from the town square across the village to the church, and that's where we bunkered down. At that point, we were in lockdown. We had a curfew. We could not be outside after dark, and we all had to go and sneak away to our host homes for the night. While we were essentially in hiding, you could hear the damage being done in the town outside. You could hear things being, broken, glass being shattered, things exploding. And so the next day, when it was bright out, when the riots had calmed down, we kind of went outside to get a feel for what's going on. Buildings were destroyed, windows in stores were shattered. There was tires, like piles of tires and debris that were set on fire throughout the night, and it just looked like a war zone. Obviously not to the extent of a legit war zone, but it was something. As a 16-year-old girl, I was terrified. Now, we were safe to walk around during daytime because there was no active riots at that point. We were also lucky enough that the Colombian military had a base in the town that we were located. So they were kind of walking the streets throughout the day to keep things under control. We actually, spent a majority of our time outside that day because we didn't want to be cooped up, and because we wanted to stay together as a team instead of separated into our, respective host homes. And so we ended up just hanging outside the church for most of the day, and one of our translators, Christian, he actually taught us how to salsa dance, which was really cool. There's videos, actually. I'll put one of the videos at this point. You can actually see where Christian's teaching me how to salsa dance, and then there's like military personnel just walking by in the background. So yeah, like it was a serious situation, but we weren't in immediate danger because we were taking precautions. We were listening to the advice of the military and law enforcement. And you know, like from the outside view, it probably looked like we were in a lot more danger than what we really were. Thankfully, like I said, the town we were in was, yeah, there was riots taking place, but not nearly as active or as large as other surrounding areas. So we were in a bit of a situation, but nothing too serious at this point. Unfortunately, because of the riots, the main route to get back to Bogota, where the airport is, it was not possible to actually drive down. Rioters were actively rioting all along the way, and so there was really no way for us to get back to the capital city safely, and we ended up missing our flights back home to Canada. Now this is where it started to get a little stressful. I know I had my fair share of emotional breakdowns at this point because I was thinking, oh my gosh, how are we gonna get back home? And me being like the good student I was like, oh my gosh, school starts in like 2 weeks. How are we, how are we supposed to get back? Like, how? And I remember just like freaking out. And as someone with an anxiety disorder, like that situation, obviously like every worst case scenario is popping up in your mind. And I was just like, I was freaking out. Maybe I didn't show it as much as I really felt it, but every negative worst case scenario popped into my head, and I was ready just to like, Jesus, take me, because I don't know how we're gonna get out of this. And so our head pastor of the trip, Pastor Rob, called our senior pastor who was in charge of our church back home in Innisfil, Ontario, and explained the situation. Yeah, that would not have been an easy conversation to have, to say, hey, 12 Canadian citizens, 8 of which are under the age of 18, are stuck in a foreign country. What foreign country, you may be wondering? Colombia, the drug capital of the world. So yes, it was not a good situation. My senior pastor back in Canada decided to contact the Canadian military to devise a plan. And first they were just gonna send in helicopters to rescue us, which sounds pretty cool. I mean, all of us teenage kids were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, we're gonna get rescued by the Canadian military from helicopter. Like, this is so cool. Like, I'm sitting there and I was like, despite how messed up of a situation this is, I got to ride a plane for the first time, a motorcycle for the first time, and now a helicopter. You know, I'm trying to be somewhat positive and make humor of a sticky situation. So the Canadian military ended up contacting the Colombian military, and they devised a plan. Unfortunately, it did not involve helicopters coming in to rescue us, but you know what? It was still a military escort. So here's what happened. Like I said, the Colombian military had a base in the town that we were located. So it was 2 or 3 days after we had missed our flights. We had no idea how we were getting home, when we were getting home. We're just kind of taking it day by day. Suddenly, we get this call, and our host wake us up, and they're like, you gotta go, you gotta go now. So we pack up all of our stuff. We don't really get to say a proper goodbye, and we're rushed in these tiny little cars to the military base in town. And so we're greeted by the I don't know what his title was, but he was the sergeant commander. He was essentially like the higher up military personnel of the base, and he met us there and he greeted us. And like, all of us are pretty timid and kind of weary, like, oh my gosh, these big burly military men with like these giant rifles are greeting us at their door. And we were kind of timid because we knew like not to ever cross them or be rude in any sort of way. And so we're all on edge, wanting to make sure that we're treating them nicely and doing everything culturally appropriate. Meanwhile, these guys are having a blast. They get to save some Canadians from from their own from like their country. So they're having a great time. They're all giddy and they're just easygoing guys. And so we started to lighten up because they were pretty easygoing. In fact, they wanted to take pictures with us because they were so excited to be able to serve their country and help Canada rescue some of their citizens. And so after we all gather, take some photos, we get told the plan. So basically they have 3 convoy trucks. They are these big trucks, and the first one was just filled with military personnel with weapons. The middle one was the one that my team and I were in. We had about 3 or 4 military personnel in the cabin of the truck, and then 2 with us in the back. And then the third one had other foreigners. I don't remember where they were from. There was like 2 or 3 of them, and another group of military personnel with guns. And they were gonna escort us the 3 hours to Bogota so that we could figure out a new way to get home. Because like I said, we missed our flights and we don't really know what we're gonna do at this point. All we know is we have a plan to get to the capital city where there are no riots, everything's under control there. And so as long as we could get there where it's completely safe, then you know what, we'll figure it out. Along the way, however, there were checkpoints. There was actually quite a few of them where there was essentially active rioters on the streets. So anytime we drove through a checkpoint, we had to cover our faces because the fear was if they saw a truckload of foreigners, it could be bad, right? Like they're rioting against their government and they're like, people are being killed, unfortunately. Places, homes, stores are being destroyed. Just the property in general is just being completely vandalized. And you know, the people losing their lives aren't just the police officers or military personnel trying to protect citizens of Colombia, but also, unfortunately, the people that are choosing to actively engage in a violent riot. So anytime we were driving through these checkpoints, we had to cover our faces and just play it safe because you never know, right? Like a situation can change like that and can go from 0 to 100. So just to be safe, we hid our identities. Eventually we make it to Bogota and we're all safe. The military personnel that escorted us were absolutely amazing. They were fun. They were like so eager to take pictures with us. I'll actually insert a few of those pictures in this video. The funny thing was, because we drove through so many checkpoints where people were like burning stuff in the streets, the debris and the black smoke, which had all the ashes and stuff in it, actually had like coated us. And so our skin was just like looking all filthy, our clothes, like we were covered in black. And so it was kind of funny. Like we showed up looking like these, I don't know, deranged foreigners who had just gone through some sort of like traumatic experience. I mean, granted, at the time, like it could have been a lot worse. We weren't in immediate danger. We had a military escort. Like if anything were to happen, we'd be okay. But when you're 16 and that happens, like it is pretty traumatic. But yeah, so we made it to Bogota safely. Our pastor and our missionary guy went to the airport to figure things out. And over the course of the following 3 or 4 days, we all got to take a plane ride home in little groups because we couldn't all go together, unfortunately. We just had to take whatever seats were available, and we made it back to Toronto. And we were greeted by family and church members who have been praying for our safety. And it was a mission trip I will never, ever forget. And it's not a mission trip that I won't forget simply because of the 3 incidents described in this video. It's one I'll never forget because I really got to see how God works. I mean, there we were stranded in another country. We had no idea of how the heck we were gonna get home. But the entire time, like, God was in control and everything worked out in the end. No one was harmed. You know, we had an amazing story to tell and we got to really reach people. That was probably the most significant part of that trip. I don't think I've really talked about it, but like kids and youth in need are my passion. I love helping kids and youth who just need to be reached, who need to be loved on, who need to be supported. And for us in Colombia, for the 2.5 weeks we were there, we got to go to schools and orphanages and just really love on kids who needed it. And I was a kid myself while I was doing this. I got to meet kids my age, and just to see the situations they were in, but the life they lived, honestly, that changed me more than anything. And I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent here about mission trips, but like, if you have never been on a mission trip, or even if you're not religious, but you want to go on a humanitarian trip, I highly recommend you do at some point. Obviously right now with the pandemic, it's a little difficult, but when things start to open up more, there's so many places in this world that need help. Now, countries are still in struggling, like India, with pandemic numbers. Like it's absolutely devastating. And obviously everything going on with Afghanistan right now, there are so many places in need. So if you ever have the opportunity to travel and to just help someone in need, for me, I love going to help the kids and the youth. Like do it. Yeah, like things happen and you might need a military escort in the end, but you know what? It's so worth it. Like there's this one photo, I'll pop it up right now. And this is me with this little girl. Her name was Selena. She was probably 3 or 4 at the time. It's been 8 years since then, so she's, you know, a preteen at this point. But I will never forget her. She came from like a poor family, but she was a member of the church that we had visited, one of the churches at least. And she was glued to my side the whole time, and I just wanted to bring her home with me. Being able to bring her joy through playing with bubbles and puppets and things like that is something I'll never forget. So yeah, there were 3 major incidents that happened on this missions trip. The third one being the most intense and one of my favorite stories to talk about. But I will never forget this trip because it was truly the first time I got to help somebody. And it was the first time I got to see God work. And it was ultimately the first time, like, I don't know, it changed me, honestly. It really did change me. And I will never, ever trade what happened for anything. The trauma I felt in the moment of everything, the illness I endured, I really, in the grand scheme of things, all that doesn't matter. What matters is that we got to see God move, we got to see people healed, we got to see people come to know who God is, and that was amazing. And honestly, it really kick-started my own journey as a Christian, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to attend Team Colombia in 2013. Before I go and before you skedaddle, I want to introduce today's book and author shout out. So this is called One by One by Ruth Ware. Now, if you have never heard of her and you love mystery suspense books, this is a must read. I have quite a few of her books. I actually ordered one not too long ago. I'm still waiting for it to come in. I don't remember which one I ordered because it was weeks ago, so it's going to be a surprise when it comes in the mail. But this is an incredible book. This book is about a company who designed an app, and they decide to go on a winter retreat as a company to bond and figure things out. Like, there's a lot to it. I'm not going to spoil it. And obviously by the title One by One, something happens along the way, and this group slowly dwindles one by one. That's all I'm gonna say. I am not gonna give any details as to why it dwindles. I'm not gonna say anything else, but I highly recommend this book and any book by Ruth Ware, really. Like The Cabin in Woman 10, I have that book. I lent it to a friend in the States. I've not gotten it back because borders have been closed for 2 years, but I'm hoping to get it back so I can add it back to my collection here. But The Woman in Cabin 10, amazing. So yeah, I'm giving Ruth Ware 2 book shoutouts today, but she deserves it. Incredible, incredible author. Again, like my previous videos, I'll link the Amazon page to this book in case you want to buy it, or the thrift book site where you can also purchase it for a little cheaper if you're on a budget. If you don't know what thrift book, I think it's just thrift book, not thrift book store, but if you don't know what thriftbooks.com is, it's a website where people can donate used books and then you can buy them for really decent prices. Sometimes you can get books that are in a little rough shape, or like they're basically brand new and you only spent $4 for it. You can go through and decide what kind of book you want. So like if I wanted to buy this one off the website, it will let you know what they have in stock. So there's either like new, fairly used, and essentially you pick what, condition, that's the word I'm looking for, which condition you want the book to be in when it comes your way. Shipping is usually pretty cheap, so that's where I usually get my books, because I am a post-college graduate and money is hard, so I tend to use thriftbooks.com to order all of my books, and I highly recommend it. Anywho, this is again not sponsored, just my book little shout out before I head off. And that's my cue. So if you like this video, leave a like. Well, can you leave a like? I mean, just click a like. I don't know. Again, I'm new, so this YouTube terminology will come to me naturally eventually. So hit the like button, comment, let me know what you thought, or actually tell me, have you ever been on a missions trip or a humanitarian? I don't know why I can't say that word. Humanitarian trip? If so, where did you go? What did you do? How was it? Tell me your stories. Also, subscribe if you'd like, because that would definitely help me out. And if you have any book recommendations, let me know. Or let me know if you read this one. I finished it within like 2 or 3 days. It was that good. But yeah, anywho, that's all I got for you today, and I hope you enjoyed today's story. Bye!